Thank you for that. Appreciate y'all. And let's jump into the questions from our adfreeshows.com. We're going to start with TL Bones, and he tweets in fantasy booking. Jeff, you stay in WCW 97 and you join the booking committee.
Oh, Lord.
How would you have booked the end of the NWO storyline with Sting, Hogan on the horizon, Brett's impending jump in the aftermath of Montreal, and etc.?
That etc. is what really gets
murky, dirty.
It is, because I think he phrased it the end of the NWO, and in 97. So I signed with WCW in 96, a 1-year deal in October, and went to 97. So we're talking October of 97. The NWO, the end of that, and I would have to look at all the chess pieces and checker pieces and all that kind of stuff. But the NWO was far from over. And the momentum that was going on was very, very special. And man, and it's been podcasted from so many different angles. It has been discussed. Shivani, Jim Ross, Eric Bischoff, so many folks that were at that time. I was talent only. But for me personally, if I would have stayed there, and look, we're doing I think he said fantasy booking here. I really do believe if all parties and minds could have come together and maybe no distractions, I think me and Flair, if we would have, well, I don't want to say finished it, but yeah, maybe finished our storyline. Obviously, we could have got stipulations and all kinds of stuff. And me obviously being the, Rick at that point, well, still, but a legacy babyface. I think we could have finished that story out and really, I'm the heel. I get beat, and it's game, set, match, but maybe even reunite the Four Horsemen in a cool way. I think a lot of legs there that we just candidly, it never got off the ground. I'll say in a long term, Rick's health had some issues. The NWO, and then when you really look at 97, 98, oh my gosh, the amount of talent, and Conrad's good at when it went from 2 hours to 3 hours. But when you have a 3-hour Nitro, a 2-hour Thunder, a massive amount of content being created, it was a challenging time. But that etc., my man, would be a real, excuse me, but shitstorm to try to figure all that booking out.
I mean, 97 is, of course, Sting and Hogan, DDP, perfect, Mongo, Dean, Eddie, Booker, Disco, Saturn, Ultimo, Regal. What are we doing? Steiners?
Peak WCW.
Wow.
Conrad's always great at steering me correctly, but that 97, 98 was peak WCW.
Nash and Hall and Sticks. I mean, just an incredible lineup. Jericho's there, Alex Wright. I mean,
super deep roster.
That's just the belt. That's just people who held the belt. That's not even who's filler and who's still doing some time. That's incredible. So, good. That would have been a fun hat for you to wear. That like you said, a lot of tentacles could have went a lot of different ways.
God rest his soul, Kevin Sullivan, being essentially the creative driving force. And I got to talk to him at the NWA convention a couple of years ago. It was after the Ric Flair last match, not long after. It feels not too long after that. My dad was over there and got signed, but I got to spend some time with Kevin Sullivan during that time. And we reminisced about a couple of things. He was aware, the podcast, he was doing a few things, and we just kind of talked about all kinds of stuff. And he was like, Jeff, the thing from the territory days, and we were talking about different bookers through the territory era. And then when things go national and you're, writing, scripting 5 hours of content a week, or 4 or 5, whatever it may be, 4 or 5 hours. It's just so different than in a territory when you're really booking, hour. In Memphis it was 90 minutes, but you're really telling an A story and maybe 2 B stories, or a B and a C, and then everything else is really, in our modern day terminology, it's all character development. And in those days, it's wins and losses, guys coming in the territory and guys going out. You're just getting different guys over in the underneath guys, and you worried about selling one match, maybe 2 or 3, and that's it. Just the world has changed, and now when you kind of look at the landscape with all the digital content being created, it's just the business continues to evolve.
All right, let's keep it rolling. We'll hit a super chat. Ty Claude hit us in the live chat. You spoke of your dad, so perfect time to get to him. Any Jerry Jarrett lessons you can share with us?
Oh, my goodness. Ty, appreciate it, man. This is a ad-free bonus episode, I guess, waiting to be recorded. But any lessons? Let me think of a good one to kind of. There all kidding aside, there are so many that I could share at different times.
Did you talk a lot about the wrestling business?
In the first 7 years of my career, riding up and down the roads and being in his office, massive amounts. In WCW, well, WWF, he was in creative up there. And so the Double J character was being developed, and he was working for Vince, and so he was but Cassio, I could tell you, other than the time, and it was a couple of years that we had our falling out, that was always really what we talked about. When I got sober in 2017, and we started having regular lunches, we'd go over to the little meet and 3, and look, we would talk about sports and maybe reminisce here and there about non-wrestling stuff, but the conversation would always be dominated by about wrestling. And sometimes, as I'll say, an old timer, he would maybe tell a story or two that I'd heard, but he liked to teach. And I'll say that he was a deep reader. He read books to the day he passed away. He always had his new book he was reading, and he'd go in through phases of reading biographies and historical stuff. And then, he wasn't real big on fiction stuff, but at time from time. But anyway, he was a deep reader. But philosophy was one of the things, and it's funny, I love Stoicism philosophy now. But as far as lessons, I want to get back to this. We always talk wrestling, and it would really be, I'm trying to think something that's topical, but one of the lessons that I'll say over the last, I don't know, maybe a couple of years, that always kind of rings in my mind is something that he really, really, really harped on. And he would essentially say, if you don't get one story over, it's impossible to get 2 and 3 and 4. You've got to get the one story over. I told this story not long ago on the Jake Paul Tyson deal. That's and yes, the female. So I don't want to discredit the female boxing match, but at the end of the day, people tuned in to see one fight. And if you really think about it, it is at one time the baddest man on the planet and a reality star, and they're coming together. But the story and the intrigue and everything, but it was one match. It was one match. And so he always talked about the foundation of professional wrestling, no matter how you build it, whether it's a TV show, whether it's a spot show, we'll call it a one-off, or it was a weekly town. You really got to start with that one match. And he was very careful about not one story. You got to figure out what is the one match you're building, then put the story behind it, then put the promotion behind it, put the marketing behind it, layer upon layer. But he really was laser focused on how the industry, because of TV rights fees, is what he always said, that he said it's in a lot of ways at times fundamentally changes the business, because you have to, quote unquote fill 2 hours of content. And he said, I understand that. But if you don't focus on that one match, on how you're going to make that one match make money, you kind of lose your way. And so that to me is one of the life lessons. And we always, he in his later years, he was very complimentary about in-ring work. When I was a kid, I didn't know shit. I didn't know how to do this. I didn't know that. But we would talk back and forth. But he's like, yeah, son, you really applied that principle to your in-ring work. You make sure you tell one story in a match and try to make that. I said, I learned that from you guys, the connection. So I think Ty, maybe the life lesson from Jerry Jarrett today would be, figure whatever it may be, keep a laser focus on what you're trying to accomplish. Don't try to do too many things at once.